Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome to the most spectacular ending of 2023. Welcome to the FIDE World Rapid and Blitz Chess Championship in 2023. So the tournament is held in Uzbekistan. We have many great players that are battling it out, that are battling for the prestigious throne for the Rapid Chess Championship, but also for the World Blitz Chess Championship. And among them, of course, we'll see the top grandmaster and the strongest player in the world, Magnus Carlsen. So the concept of the rapid section is like this. We'll see 13 rounds of 15 minutes plus 10 seconds increment chess, which is, I think, a great format for us. We'll see many great tactical shots, great opportunities for many players. We'll see probably many beautiful theoretical novelties, but also probably many inaccuracies, mistakes, blunders that will cost many players some games. In my opinion, a very beautiful format for us to follow, and we're starting now with this beautiful rapid section with an amazing gameplay by Parham Maghsoodloo against Magnus Carlsen from the round 4. The first 3 games, Magnus had, I think, a decent success. He had 2 wins and 1 draw. Now in the game 4, it was really beautiful roller coaster, pay good attention. In my opinion, really spectacular game from the World Rapid Chess Championship in 2023. So let's see now what happened. The game finished a couple minutes ago. Parham Maghsoodloo opened with the move d4. Magnus' response was knight to f6. As we have c4, e6, knight to f3, the counter in Nimzo or anti-Nimzo Indian setup, d5 transposition into the Queen's Gambit declined, 3 knights variation, and after bishop to e7 we have the amazing Harrwitz attack here played by Parham Maghsoodloo. If you are interested more into this opening, please check out our playlist of the Harrwitz attack. Here's the link of the video. You can have a great preparation, I think, here on my YouTube chess channel. In this particular sideline, in this particular variation, we have covered many important sidelines in our analysis. So here, after move bishop to f4, we have a kingside castling by Magnus. We have e3, c5, immediately breaking in the center. And now, as usual, I think here still the best line is d takes c5, releasing the pressure in the center of the board. And in some lines also you can play afterwards c takes d5, keeping black maybe with an isolated d pawn. We have bishop to c5, a3, preparing b4, knight to c6, and now usually as I mentioned also in our studies, but also let's repeat it again, queen to c2 is a beautiful delaying move, because now we're waiting basically black to take d takes c4, and then of course the bishop would come out with a tempo. If you play here bishop to e2 or bishop to d3 immediately, then black will get an extra tempo, and then you have to again play with the same piece. So that's not good. So that's why here Parham Maghsoodloo is delaying the move with the bishop placed normally here queen to c2. We have rook to e8. Interesting sideline here by Magnus. You could of course go into aggressive methods with queen to a5, but then probably white would continue with rook to d1 and would control here the progressive idea with d4. That's why rook to e8. Magnus is preparing now to move e5, hitting the bishop on f4. And here Parham makes maybe even, I would not say it's an inaccuracy or something, but it's I think a sideline that's not so good for white. A better idea I think here is to play the more normal bishop to g3, because now e5 doesn't make sense, because we can immediately take here the pawn on d5 and invite basically the queen into the game after a couple of trades of pieces. Then rook to d1 is going to happen, and again white gets an extra tempo in the opening stage. So that's why rook to d1, okay, it is aggressive against here the queen on the d file, but this gives Magnus Carlsen the opportunity to hit the center with e5. We have bishop to g5. Here Magnus breaks and enters immediately with the move d4. This is the way to go. And here Parham continues with knight to d5, pins further the knight on f6. Magnus continues with bishop to e7, bishop takes f6, bishop takes knight, here bishop takes on f6, and now bishop to d3 hits simply the weak pawn on h7. We have g6 by Magnus, knight takes f6, queen to f6, bishop to e4, hitting also the knight on c6, and Magnus is going for the ultimate drawish line, I think, here with the move bishop to f5. And now comes already surprise here by Parham. Parham takes. bishop takes f5, which is not really the optimal continuation here by white. A better choice was simply to castle. Then after something like bishop to e4, we take. Probably black would play here rook to d8, and then here I think white should continue with this 3 versus 2 pawn majority attack. Of course, black has a slightly better situation in the center of the board with this 2 versus 1 pawn majority in the center of the board, and still the queen is a little bit exposed by the heavy artillery, by the rook activity on the e file. So that was maybe here the way to go, but Parham Maghsoodloo played, I think, here really his first inaccuracy in the game. Magnus takes now and connects now 3 very mobile pawns in the center of the board. We have e takes d4 by Parham, we have knight to d4, and now another inaccuracy here by Parham. He plays queen to c3. Here Parham should have simply played knight to d4, because after e takes d4, king to f1, okay, your king is not, of course, optimal on f1, but we can say that Magnus has also something to worry about, because these 2 pawns are weak, f5 pawn and also the d4 pawn, and we can also say Magnus Carlsen's situation in front of the king is also not optimal, because the king is a little bit naked. So this was again a must continuation here for white. Here Parham makes a mistake with queen to c3, and Magnus fixes simply the structure now, fixes simply the position around the square d4 with rook to d8. Good move here by Magnus. Rook to d2, we have queen to g6, king to f1, we have now f4, knight to e1, and now queen to a6, hitting also now the weak pawn on c4, and the king is also now exposed on this diagonal. We have h4, maybe again not the optimal move. The engine suggests here again that you should go for knight to f3 and finally trade off this unpleasant knight on d4. This would be maybe a good continuation for white, but with the move h4, Parham tried to maybe get at least some kind of a breathing square for the king, trying maybe somehow to play king to h2. Magnus continues with rook to c8, hits the pawn, and now look at this with b5. The position is simply collapsing here for white. This is simply too much pressure here on the c file, and from this point on, black should be much better. Here, king to g1, we have b takes c4, b takes c4, rook to c4, queen to h3, and now queen to e6. Here, as I said, Magnus Carlsen grabbed the pawn, has still the better activity with the knight, has here this 3 pawns that could storm now here in the center of the board and also on the f file. So from this point on, the game becomes simply a one-way ticket in black's favor. We have king to h2, queen takes h3. After a couple of trades of queens, Magnus simply pushes the pawn further. We have f3, e3. Good move here by Magnus, passing through, creates of course the supported pass pawn on the e file, and this is really devastating position now for white. The engine gives here almost a +4 evaluation in black's favor. So here, rook to d1, we have h5, knight to d3, Magnus pushed the pawn further, we have rook to b1, and now maybe a tiny little inaccuracy here by Magnus, rook to c3, but still black is much better. But let's see what the engine suggests. The engine suggests here something like rook to e3 here, then after something like knight to e1, simply grabbing this pawn and again going into a favorable endgame. But with rook to c3 also perfectly fine. Magnus allowed here with a beautiful tactic Parham to take out now the pawn, but now Magnus makes a huge mistake. So Magnus thought that when he gave up the pawn on f4, that he is basically deflecting the knight from the defense of the e1 square, and Magnus thought with the move knight to c2 that this is completely winning. But Magnus missed here really a beautiful defensive tactic that Parham really saw. Incredible move that he played. He played here first knight to c6 with the threat to play knight to e3, a new fork. But let's go back. After move knight to f4, what Magnus should have simply played is rook to e3. That was now the immediate winning move, because what should you do? If you go here with the rook, then you get attacked by the knight. So basically you have to give up now the knight for a pawn, and after knight to e2, I think this is a position that white could even resign immediately, because black is up a whole piece. Okay, maybe white has an extra pawn here, 3 versus 2 on this side of the board, but this is simply too much pressure in my opinion. This was the way to go. So Magnus missed really, I think, even as sort of a beginner's move. Rook to e3, wins the game immediately here for black, but he went for this line, knight to c2, but Parham now found the defensive tactic, found a tactic that actually leads into a drawish position. Really great defensive play by Parham, because after knight to d5, rook to c6, must move for Magnus, controlling the f6 square. We have knight to b4, we have knight to a3 here by Magnus. Parham takes the rook on c6, Magnus takes also here the rook on b1. Now we have rook takes b1, Magnus promotes now to queen, Parham gives out now the rook for the pawn, but now after knight to a7 by Parham Maghsoodloo, this is now actually a theoretical draw, because we have here a 3 versus 2 situation, and what white only needs now to do now is bring the knight somehow back into the defense, keep everything glued together, keep everything compact, and this is not a winnable position here for white. Really wild stuff how Magnus missed the whole game in one particular move. So we have f5 by Magnus. Magnus is of course still battling. We have king to f6, f4 by Parham, rook to d1, king to f3. Magnus is of course trying to get the king closer somehow to the action, and Parham finds of course the beautiful defensive idea. Now what Parham basically needs to do is to keep the knight on g5 or on e5, where the knight is supported by his pawns, and he should just move the king to f3, f2. And the problem for black is here that black cannot have access somehow to these pawns, because the king on the f file is restricting of course also the king's ability to black's king's ability to play. And as I said, you should just repeat moves, maybe knight to g5, knight to e5, and it's a thematic draw. So let's see now what happened. Rook to a4, Magnus is battling of course, goes also for the knight, gets of course the king closer to the action, but now Parham makes this repetition. He goes here, controls also in some lines the king. Magnus has to be also careful. If he goes somewhere like b3, then you could get the fork on c5. We have rook to a1. Here Parham delivers a couple of checks, and again steps back to this optimal square for the knight on the square g5. Rook to a6, king to a3. We have king to c4 here by Magnus. Knight to f7. We have king to e6, king to f2. Here after a couple more moves, again we have reached a similar position where Parham is just playing with the knight. Again knight to g5, king to d3. Again a couple of attacks by Magnus against the king. We have a new check, but you see Parham is simply staying with the king on the f file. There's simply no good way for white to go for the pawns, and Magnus has also to be careful somehow, because if you get too far away from the action, then there is maybe this idea knight to e6 and then knight to g7, attacking also both of these pawns that are also isolated. So Magnus has to also worry about his pawn. So we have king to d2, we have king to f2. Magnus of course repeats now a couple of moves and is trying to somehow get the king behind, but it's not working. We have rook to c6. Here Parham again stays with the knight where he should stay with the knight on the square g5. We have rook to a7, rook to a6, king to f7, a new check, and again a couple of repetitions. And here comes now after rook to a7 the critical moment of the game. Here Magnus attacked the knight, and as we said, you should just stay on g5 or on e5, and nothing can be done here by black. But here Parham makes the crucial blunder of this this amazing endgame. We have knight to d6. This is not working because Magnus realized now the opportunity to somehow lock the knight, because the problem here after rook to d7, great move here by Magnus Carlsen, is that you cannot take the pawn on f5. If you do that, then the king comes here. You have only the square h6, and now we deliver a check. You step back. Now the king is far away from the action, and we play here from black's perspective the beautiful rook to d7, which controls now the knight. You could maybe try to play the move g4, but now you lose this one. Even if you take out this one now, this is not working. In one particular moment the knight is going to be trapped. We simply go for the knight the knight is restricted by the rooks and kings activity, so this is not working. That's the issue about this move. Rook to d7. Here Magnus went with knight, pardon me, Parham went with knight to e8. Magnus plays now rook to f7. You see how the knight is now simply far away from the action. Again, knight to d6, new attack against the knight. Here Parham is trying to battle, but now the knight is out of game. You don't have access to these two squares, and now the king is going for the lonely knight here on e8. We have king to f3. Magnus goes for the knight. After a couple more moves, a new attack against the knight. Knight to a6. Rook to d6, again controlling the knight, that the knight cannot get back into the game here through the d file. We have king to e3. Magnus attacks now. We have a new check, but now after king to b6, knight to a8 in this particular position, Parham Maghsoodloo resigns. So of course king to b7 is going to happen, and this is game over. So what to say? Unnecessary loss here for Parham. This was the crucial mistake. He allowed the rook to get back into the game. As I said, you just repeat knight to e5 or knight to g5 and nothing can be done. So Magnus got away here with the murder, but we have to say it, Magnus had a completely winning middle game where he should have simply go for this move, rook to e3. So okay, good. This is, as I said, this rapid chess, many inaccuracies, mistakes, and blunders we will see for sure. So Magnus now, after 4 rounds, has 3 wins and a draw, which is, I think, a good result in the beginning, because in the beginning, I think, when you play such tournaments, it's not even important to play your best chess. It's just important to play chess that gives you points. So now Magnus, I think, didn't play still his optimal chess. When Magnus gets getting warmed up, I think you will see a different kind of Magnus. This is, I think, simply his tournament. Magnus enjoys really in this rapid section, so in my opinion, of course, Magnus is now the top favorite to win the FIDE World Rapid Chess Championship in 2023. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. We'll cover, of course, more games from this super event. If you want to see more commented chess games here on my YouTube chess channel, check out our commented chess games, but also our commented chess games played by computers, where we analyze some Stockfish games and other top engine games. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say in the end? Chess is the best, of course.